Hi, my name is Kyle Sharon. I've lived in Frederick County for about 30 years, and today I'd like to take just a few minutes to speak to you about my community advocacy project, which is based around substance abuse and harm reduction around substance abuse. Substance abuse is more commonly referred to medically as substance use disorder. What exactly is substance use disorder? It is the persistent use of a drug by someone despite them knowing the most of the time massive negative repercussions that can come from using said drug. We're going to speak about some of those repercussions that the user might face. We're also going to speak about some of the repercussions the greater community might face, as well as some harm reduction tips that we can use as family, friends, and sometimes just as strangers in our everyday lives. Before we do that, we're going to touch some stats from Maryland in 2022. There were 2,586 fatal overdoses. Those are fatal overdoses from all substances, including alcohol, but we have to keep in mind that they're just overdoses. So those don't include any cases of inebriated driving, fights that happen from being inebriated, or any other sort of accident that might happen. These are just deaths from overdoses within one's body. It's also getting closer to the time where we're at Christmas, and Christmas, December and January tend to be the two heaviest months for overdoses. Researchers have done a lot of studies on this, and it tends to be because the weather puts people in a depressive state with the grayness outside. It's typically rainier, it's a wetter season, so it tends to put people in that depressive state, compounded with the fact that some people might not be able to get back to their families for Christmas. They might be working, they might live in a different part of the country, they might live in a totally different country, or they simply might not be able to leave their houses to get where they want to get to. Any number of these reasons, compounded with the depressive state, can make people who might not have been using relapse back into using, and because they lack a tolerance when they take their first dose, they might pass away because they don't have a tolerance, so they overdose. Because of that, because Christmas is coming up, it's very important that we remember to call our loved ones, call our friends, especially anyone that you might even be slightly worried about for developing SUDS, just to let them know we are here. We might not be there physically, but we are here mentally. We're just a phone call away. You can call us at any time. Doing that massively reduces the risks of somebody developing SUDS or relapsing back into SUDS. So early adolescence and addiction play a large role with each other. What that means is the chance for SUDS to develop is heavily increased or decreased while in early adolescence. There was a study done by 3 researchers on mice, both young mice and their mothers. The study was done by Levis, Baram, and Mahler. It was posted in the European Journal of Neuroscience, and it was entitled Neurodevelopment Origins of Substance Use Disorders, Evidence from Animal Models of Early Life Adversity and Addiction. That's a long title, but what they did in that study, they took mother mice with their babies. They put some of them in nice cages that had a lot of bedding. They put some of them in not so nice cages that did not have a lot of bedding. In addition, they would take some babies and wean them from their mothers more quickly than they would wean the other ones from their mothers. They found that in both cases, these were separated instances, so that the bedding was one scenario and the mother removal was a separate scenario. But in both instances, there was a negative correlation with the development of SUDS and the positive reinforcement aspect of the study. Essentially, what happened was when the children were given more times around their mother, or when they were given a healthier environment to live in, which they deemed was more safe, as well as the mothers, both of them were at a less risk of developing SUDS, whereas the babies and the mothers that were placed in a worse environment or who were separated from each other too early on or too quickly, both groups were at a higher risk. Both the mothers and the babies were at a higher risk for developing SUDS. And these are in environments where all mice, all babies, all mothers on the good side and the bad side are all given regular food and food that's laced with drugs. So everybody, so to say, has an equal opportunity to develop SUDS. And it's clear which group develops SUDS and which group doesn't. How this translates to children, though, to human children. So it shows us that, number one, children need a strong, healthy family life. They need parents that are actively putting aside time, devoting time, so that they can learn and grow with their children and show their children that they are there for them and that they want to see them progress in life. In addition, the children need to know that they have a safe place to come home to, one that they're not going to be neglected at, one where they won't be physically abused, one where there is enough food to come home to, so on and so forth, where the child feels safe. Doing these two things, providing a healthy family life and a healthy living environment, drastically reduce the chances of a child developing SUDS. It also helps drastically reduce somebody who has stopped abusing drugs to go back to using drugs. Before we move on, it's important to note that a very common misconception when it comes to substance abuse is that it's either a poor issue or a rich issue, depending on how you look at it. The true fact is that it's neither poor nor rich. It's just an issue that we need to face. Typically, the socioeconomic disparity, how much money somebody has, the wealth disparity, usually just plays into what drugs they can procure and what environment they're in. It usually has no bearing on if that person will develop SUDS or not. What that means is that children from poor households with a stronger family life are still at a lower risk of developing SUDS than somebody from a rich family with poor family values. The rich family in that case is much more likely of having a child that develops substance abuse issues than the poor family who is actively still involved in their child's life. Bottom line, be involved in your child's life in a positive way. So what can we do as adults in Frederick County to reduce the chances of not only our children developing SUDS, but our greater community being negatively affected by those who have developed SUDS? The number one thing is to learn how to use and administer naloxone. Naloxone is a anti-opioid overdose drug. It reverses the effect of an overdose if somebody is experiencing an opioid overdose. You can attend classes from Frederick County government who will not only give you the class for free on how to administer it and what it does, they'll also give you a naloxone at the end of it. If you don't want to attend one of those classes, you can always go to any pharmacy and buy naloxone. It's very affordable. It's over the counter. You do not need a prescription. The best part about it is that it's totally safe. So if you suspect somebody is having an overdose, and you suspect that it's an opioid overdose, you can administer naloxone, and even if it doesn't happen to be an opioid overdose, there's not going to be any negative repercussions. The person won't experience anything. It's only a net positive. It will only ever do good to give somebody naloxone. The bittersweet truth about naloxone in Maryland, in America, as a whole, in Maryland, of those 2,586 overdoses, 80% of them were opioid overdoses. So there's an 80% chance that if you use naloxone on somebody in Maryland, it's going to save their life. Whereas in the greater United States, that's 70%. So 70% of the overdoses in 2022 were from opioids. That's still a massive number. So again, if you ever see someone who you suspect, just use naloxone. You will probably save a life. Your second step is just know the resources. There's a few different places that you can call, things you can do. If you actively suspect somebody is overdosing, as we've been over, use naloxone on them first and then call 911. We want to use the naloxone so that it starts acting, and again, it's always a net positive, so use that first, then call 911. If you suspect that somebody is at risk of developing SUDS, they might be going down that path, or they already have, but they have an overdose and you're worried for them, you want them to stop. You can always give them the SAMHSA national hotline. It's a drug harm reduction hotline. It's 1-800-662-4357. They have counselors that will listen, they'll talk, they'll engage, they will offer resources in your area, but most importantly, they won't judge. They know what people are going through. A lot of them are ex-users themselves, and they just want to see their community and the people grow as a whole. You can always go down to our wonderful hospital, Frederick Health. If you call 240-566-3300, you'll get the hospital operator, and if you ask them about drug reduction or drug harm reduction or any resources in the area, they will be able to point you in the right way. They have tons of resources in the hospital. Every now and then they might do a drug reduction class, but they are pretty rare. But every now and then, if you keep a lookout on their website, you might be able to find one. Lastly, this is for nearly every state in the United States. Much like calling 411, if you call 211, you'll be brought to a database of all of the resources that Frederick County offers. You might even be able to get into the whole Maryland database. Somebody will help you find resources for pretty much any topic that you want to know. So this isn't only important for our topic at hand for drug abuse, this is also important just if you want to know about a location you're in that you might not be very familiar with. If you dial 211, it's a resource database where somebody will walk you through and guide you to resources in your area for pretty much any topic you want to talk about. That concludes everything that I wanted to talk about today. I thank you very much for listening with me, and I hope you learned something about harm reduction, or some sort of understanding that people who are experiencing SUDS, who have developed it, it's not typically a wanted choice. Nobody woke up one day and said, I would love to have this addiction. This has been a lifelong process that has built and built and built until it has finally cracked open, and now we're just trying to mend those pieces back together. Again, my name is Kyle Sharon, and I hope you learned something today, and